the fourth oldest. With your permission, I'll just launch straight into my presentation and we can have a discussion afterwards. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm excited to share with you a little bit about the history and the background of this incredible organization that's based in Port Townsend, Washington. So I'll just go through a few slides and why don't we hold questions for the end. CENTRUM, as you know, is based at Port Townsend, Washington. I'll talk about the history in just a minute. This is an image of the main venue that we use. It's a World War I dirigible balloon hangar that we converted in 1990 after the filming of Officer and a Gentleman into a 1,200-seat concert venue. It has these two 40-foot doors, which we use as billboards, and the concert experience is both indoors and outdoors. But you'll hear through the presentation, what we do at CENTRUM is far more than just about music. One important thing to know is that CENTRUM was founded by the state of Washington, and I'll put some context to that in a minute, but there were three state agencies that came together to create the organization. The State Arts Council, or Arts Commission, ArtsWA, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, so the superintendent for schools for the entire state, and the Parks Commission. Those three entities combined at the same time that Fort Worden State Park was created to establish CENTRUM as the anchor tenant at the park. And I'll just launch in now with the background and history of the organization a little bit. In 1961, Governor Albert Rossellini, who's shown here, created the Washington State Arts Commission. As its chair, he appointed Professor John Ashby Conway of the UW School of Drama. Conway, who's seen in this picture, had co-founded Allied Arts of Seattle. And in addition, in 1961, the Hood Canal floating bridge opened, making the Olympic Peninsula much more easily accessible from Seattle for the first time. And as it happened, Mr. Conway bought an old farmhouse in Port Townsend, and he acquired that farmhouse from this woman, Mary Johnson. Mary was a cultural dynamo who came to Port Townsend in 1958 from the Tacoma area. She would, over the next decade, launch the movement to restore our community's Victorian homes and downtown buildings. In fact, she opened the Olympic Peninsula's first art gallery. She also started a summer school to teach music and visual arts to students of all ages. And it may therefore be no surprise that Conway's very first appointment to the new State Arts Commission was Mary Johnson, who became its inaugural secretary. The Arts Commission immediately launched a search for a permanent, multi-purpose art center where artists and thinkers and their students could expand their creative horizons for the benefit of all. They wanted a campus with lodging, meeting rooms, and the possibility for meal services. And they surveyed 22 different sites all over the state of Washington. Their favorites, by a long stretch, were Port Townsend's Fort Worden and the nearby Fort Flagler, which is at Marrowstone Island here in Jefferson County. Both Worden and Flagler had been closed as Army forts following the conclusion of World War II. Led by Conway and by Mary Johnson, the Arts Commission settled on Fort Worden, the largest and the closest to a bustling town. Through the 1950s, so after World War II, it had been used by the state as a juvenile detention center. The timing, therefore, was perfect. And as we know, in the mid-1960s, the interest in public support for the arts was really burgeoning and growing. The National Endowment for the Arts was originally imagined by President Kennedy and created by President Johnson in 1965. And further funded by President Nixon, and eventually led by NEA Director Nancy Hanks. Federal funds flowed to all of the state arts councils and helped fuel a vast rate of growth of arts programs, theaters, opera companies, and arts nonprofits all over the United States. At that same exact time in 1965, the voters in Washington elected a really progressive governor, Dan Evans. It was in 1967 that he appointed the Arts Commission's first full-time director, a painter and arts administrator, James Hazeltine. Among other priorities, Hazeltine embraced the vision for a permanent art center at Fort Worden and became its central driving force. The Arts Commission authorized several studies to examine viable business models, And the most dramatic of those was drafted by Seattle architect John Graham Jr., also responsible for the Seattle Space Needle. It called for Fort Worden to become a center for creative development. And that brought ideas for the most accomplished artists together with the most creative students from all over the state of Washington. When the existing juvenile detention center eventually closed in 1971, the Arts Commission presented itself as a possible new landlord for Fort Worden. That dream, however, ran onto the fiscal rocks. As many of you will remember, that same year, 1971, Boeing went into a financial tailspin, and a statewide recession followed. State funds for innovation effectively evaporated overnight. Into that breach stepped Charles Odegaard, who was director of the Washington State's Parks Commission and who had been serving since the Rossellini years. Parks was far better funded than and had far better political support than the newly formed State Arts Commission. Odegaard had brainstormed with Hazeltine through the years about Fort Worden, so he therefore quickly endorsed the Creative Center idea, but this time with State Parks as its landlord instead of the Arts Commission. In late 1971, Governor Evans and his powerful chief of staff, James Dolliver, transformed Fort Worden into State Parks Authority, but with the caveat that parks give preference to the Arts Commission for its ongoing programs. So the challenge, of course, was to take this dilapidated, empty campus full of 90 buildings that you see and fill that with activity. So alas, the Arts Commission would not gain control over the permanent Center for Creative Development at Fort Worden, but the Graham report had suggested that an independent nonprofit organization could operate the center at Fort Worden as a creative center for lifelong learning. Hazeltine had an ace up his sleeve, and that ace was the 40-year-old charismatic and capable director of cultural arts in the Tacoma School District. In late 1972, Joe Wheeler was driven to Port Townsend by Jim Hazeltine. It was a rainy, windy day as they drove over the hill to Fort Worden State Park, but the sun broke through. The whitewashed buildings lit up, and Hazeltine said, they're all empty. Wheeler said that he was then and there infected with Fort Worden fever. With the help of poet Bill Ransom and other artists, Joe Wheeler invented a nationally unique operation. It would combine artistic process with performance, and it would cater first to artists and creators and second to audiences. It would spearhead all kinds of arts from all genres of music to visual arts, writing, dance, and drama. And it would be set, of course, in the spectacular 434-acre campus at Fort Worden, surrounded by forest and crystal clear waters of the Salish Sea. The Arts Commission hired Wheeler as their consultant. It told him to invent the programs, set up the nonprofit, and find funding. And Joe was a whiz at all of this, making friends with the National Endowment for the Arts, with Governor Evans, with budget-writing legislators and wealthy Seattleites. In the summer of 1973, as the state created Fort Worden State Park officially, it simultaneously created CENTRUM. The name is a Latin term used for roundabouts in the center of European cities. And as the first Washington State Park staff was moving into Fort Worden, Joe Wheeler and a skeleton staff of artists also were moving in. Whenever state parks opened up at Fort Worden building, Wheeler was the first in line to sign a lease. This worked for Parks, which had a huge empty campus replete with 90 buildings, theaters, a schoolhouse, barracks, meeting rooms, and housing galore. And it worked for Joe Wheeler. He placed teaching artists in those buildings, which included blacksmiths, printers, publishers, glassblowers, and metalsmiths. In the spring of 1974, CENTRUM put on its first programs that drew gifted public school students to the campus to work for a week with artists and other creative thinkers, thanks to partnership funding from the superintendent of schools in Olympia. In the summer of '74, CENTRUM hosted its first arts programs for a wider audience of artists and students. We had a writers' conference, creative printing, summer dance, visual arts, and drama. Starting in 1975, I'm sorry, I jumped forward here. Sorry about that. I'm hitting the wrong buttons. Starting in 1975, we launched our festival format to bring together masters and students for an immersive week of cultural exchange, capped by many public performances. The new programs eventually included week-long workshops in chamber music, fiddle, jazz, acoustic blues, and a nationally recognized artist in residence program. Joe would later go on to lead Centrum until 1996, almost a quarter century. He was active on the board until his death in 2009. But since 1996, Centrum has had only 4 other executive directors until I was recruited 10 years ago. Centrum's economic base has shifted, of course, since its founding from large state subsidies to mostly private and earned and donated funds. Today, Centrum receives comparatively little support from the State Arts Commission, the entity that started it, though it has an unbroken 50-year legacy of line item funding in the state budget through our affiliation with OSPI. I'm pleased to say that Centrum has recently signed a new groundbreaking long-term lease for the 13 Fort Worden buildings that we occupy, coming closer than ever to the Arts Commission's original dream for a permanent arts and culture center for all Washington residents. In our case, we've signed leases for the next 25 years with no rent, but in turn, we've agreed to take on $15 million in deferred maintenance and restoration projects to assure that these facilities will be here 50 to 100 years from now. I'm showing now a little bit of the history of where we are and how we've developed since that early years in our founding. One of the things that we like to do is we like to put all of our customers into Google Maps so that we can literally see where they come from. So what you see in front of you is a map from last year of our workshop participants. Again, most of what we do at Centrum is week-long touch points with artists of all ages. They come from 17 different countries, from all 50 states, and from 77% of the counties in Washington. If we look at a US map alone, you can see that those are places where our students came. The students, again, range in age from age 4 to 98. If we look at a map of our ticket buyers, it's a similar map, maybe a reflection of the fact that Port Townsend is such a tourist destination. These are locations from where ticket buyers came last season. And I'm happy to tell you that right now we're in the heart of our peak season at Fort Worden, and we are experiencing 2019 levels again. We thought it would be a year from now before we would attain that milestone, but it feels like we're back. The numbers are really strong this year, and we're about a year ahead of schedule. We thought we would just take a step closer to 2019 in the summer of 2023, but it's actually rebounding quite strongly. This is just a list of where the participants come from all over the state. This is a helpful list when I'm meeting with legislators to make sure that they can see that we're serving their home district. If we look at a history of the economics of the organization, today Centrum has an operating budget a little north of $4 million a year. If we add in the capital projects that we're involved in, it's about an $8 million budget in 2023. But you can see since the 1990s, the blue chart there is the growth of our workshop revenue. The workshops are a 7-day transaction. The yellow graph are ticket sales. That's a 2-hour transaction. So when I said earlier that the first priority was on the learning, that's a great reflection here. The second priority is on the performances. So we do about $250,000 in ticket sales every year, but the main meat and potatoes of our organization and our engine is the week-long residential workshop model. You can see, of course, we had a dip during COVID. We're rebounding very, very nicely from that now. I think the 2023 map will mimic 2020 and 2019 quite closely. I'm just going to talk you through some of the legacy programs at Centrum. These are the long-standing programs that have earned our reputation over the last 50 years. The Writers' Conference started in year 1 at Centrum. That is always the second week in July. We have a Fiddle Festival, which was the first of its kind in the country, started in 1976. That's always the week of July 4th. We're in a jazz festival this week. It's always the last week in July. It's a huge international jazz workshop and festival. Next week, we're in our acoustic blues workshop, which is pre-war acoustic blues. So it differs from most of the blues festivals that you'll see around the country, which tend to be more electrified Chicago blues. We do acoustic pre-war blues, which is pretty incredible. We do a Brazilian choro music workshop, week-long chamber music workshop, week-long voice program, and we have regular free concerts for the public from June until August, each Friday in the summertime at Fort Worden State Park. We also have an extensive array of youth programs. We have a local program called Tales, Text, and Theater, which serves students in our local middle school here. We have a statewide high school writing conference. We do a week of high school dance in partnership with Seattle Theater Group. That partnership is 15 to 20 years in duration right now. We do an incredible program called Explorations, which gets into multidisciplinary art forms and forces kids from all over the state of Washington to learn to take artistic risk. So they have to dance, they have to sing, they have to act, they have to draw, they have to write. And it helps show these kids not only that they're capable of doing things they never thought, but it breaks down those barriers and builds a lot of self-confidence. And we have a program called Water World, which is a combination of marine science and the arts, which we do in partnership with the Port Townsend Marine Science Center, one of the many nonprofits that share our campus. We've instituted a lot of new programs since I came at the end of the recession. So goes the economy, so goes Centrum. We have a brand new program that we started a number of years ago for students of migrant families from all over Washington. This is done in partnership with OSPI. It's called Voices from the Field Arts Academy. It's extremely powerful, and often it's the first time these children have been away from their parents. So if you can imagine, let's say you're 13 years old, you come out to Fort Worden, you get your own dorm room. It's kind of like moving into college. You get your own room, maybe for the first time ever, and you're meeting kids of your age from all over the state. In that particular program, all of the students are students of migrant families. So it's very powerful and very empowering. I mentioned our chamber music program. We also started a creative aging program in partnership with the Frye Art Museum, which ran for a number of years and has been on hiatus since COVID. We started a ukulele workshop in 2013. Average age is 70. It's mostly women. It has sold out every single year. We've never advertised it. There is huge demand for that program, which is fun. We started a sister program to the migrant program, but in this case for students of Native American families. We did that at Fort Worden for 3 years. You can see the picture in the above right. That's one of the pictures from that program. We had exclusively Native faculty members. And after the 3rd year, the tribes decided that they would move the program to tribal lands, which we completely endorsed. We started a month-long residency program for 6 emerging artists from the Pacific Northwest. Those are selected by an independent jury, and they live and work together for an entire month, the month of October, in residence at Centrum with studio space, lodging, and meal plans. We have a Red Hot Strings weekend, which we call an intensive, which is the early form of jazz, which is sort of a mix of folk music, blues, and jazz. And we started a new program just this year called Strong Voices, which is like the Native and the Migrant program, but for students in foster care. Those students are selected by the state of Washington, and we're looking forward to expanding that program as we move that forward. We have a very robust artist in residence program. We do 200 artist residencies a year. Most of those are 1 week in duration. It covers all different art disciplines. Some of those are group residencies, but most are individual residencies. You can see the list there in the 3rd bullet point. We were partners with a lot of the national artist residency organizations to start the Alliance of Artist Communities, and we're an exceptional company with that list. And as I mentioned, we have this 1 month-long program. However, next year, we're starting a new residency program specifically for art curators from all over the state of Washington. We feel that the curators that are running these museums all over the state often don't get time to work together and to be in retreat with one another. So that we're really excited to start that. And I'll share with you in a minute a brand new facility we're bringing online, which will facilitate that work. These are just some pictures of some of the artists in residence at Centrum. Most of these, I think, are visual art photos, but we have composers, choreographers, writers, screenwriters, you name it. It's all different disciplines. And the neat thing about the residencies is if you want to just come and be contemplative for the week, that's perfectly fine. There's zero outcomes and zero expectations. So if it means sitting and reading or sitting and thinking, that's okay. If you want to walk on the beach, that's fine too. But most people are generating new work, and we're happy to support that. During the pandemic, we discovered something really interesting. We obviously migrated a lot of what we were doing to an online format. And it was that first year, 2020, that then I realized, wow, we could make online learning a permanent part of what we do at Centrum. We're already reaching a global constituency of artists. But I realized if we could layer that online option over top of the in-person experience, we could probably double or triple our market share over the next 10 or 15 years. So with a grant from the Murdoch Charitable Trust, we invested in $364,000 worth of broadcasting equipment. Murdoch provided half of that, and we raised the other half. So we're now making broadcasting and online participation a permanent part of what we do. We're still in the nascent phases of this. We had to learn all of the equipment, and we've had a lot of new transition in our staffing because of COVID. But we're really excited about that potential, so that there's no barrier in terms of cost or travel for artists to participate no matter where they are. So we're really excited what that represents. This is just one image from inside the Wheeler Theater of what that looks like. In this case, this is a young person in our community learning how to use the equipment and help us share what we do with people on the internet all over the world. It's very, very exciting. I mentioned these new leases. I spent the better part of the pandemic negotiating these 25-year leases for all the cultural nonprofits at Fort Worden. In many ways, if you know the Presidio in San Francisco, Fort Worden is very, very similar. We've got all of these physical assets of a former military base, but they're now home for most nonprofits. Nobody lives at Fort Worden, but there's many groups that call it home, and I'll show you a list of those in just a second. If we look at a bird's eye view of the map of the fort, this is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Can you see my mouse if I move that around? Yeah. So we have large scale homes here. These are the officers' housing like you would find at any military base. These are mostly 6 and 7 bedroom homes. We have 2 theaters here, the McCurdy Pavilion, which I showed you, and we have a small 280 seat theater here. We have large meeting rooms surrounding the parade grounds here. So these are big open program spaces with very large buildings inside. We have a dining area here, the Commons, which is capable of serving 500 people at an hour in terms of a servery and a cafeteria. There's an old schoolhouse on the building. There's a lot of artist cabins up on the hill. The buildings that are in yellow are the ones that are under Centrum's lease. We have a pier and the Port Townsend Marine Science Center down here, and a bunch of other large-scale buildings in the center of the campus, which during the pandemic, we focused on to negotiate these leases, believing that we could re-identify this corridor at the campus as the center of arts and culture at Fort Worden State Park. So within that dotted line includes the Port Townsend School of Woodworking, Copper Canyon Press, which is one of the most celebrated poetry presses in the world. Centrum brought them here in 1976. We have Corvidae Press, which is a volunteer-run printing press. Madrona Mind Body Institute, which is a wellness and yoga institute. We have Northwind School of the Art, and we have KPTZ Radio. We all share this corridor now in terms of our leases, and we're all committed to restore these facilities over the next 25 years so they can be here 25, 30, 100 years from now. This is a list of some of the nonprofits that share the campus. We also have higher education. Peninsula College and Goddard College are on the campus. The Marine Science Center, which I mentioned. We have a Coast Artillery Museum. We have a recording studio, Friends of Fort Worden, etc. It's a diverse array of group members and none of us overlap, so it's quite powerful. I mentioned the new facility. This is a 17,000 square foot building that was just renovated. And during the pandemic, the Fort Worden Public Development Authority approached Centrum to see if we would manage this space. So we now have a lease for the first and second floor in this building. And I'll jump ahead to show you what that looks like. We have double height ends to each side of the building, which are art studio and art exhibition spaces. There's a central hallway, which is in pink, which is going to be an exhibition space for local art, where we'll have international and regional artists on the other ends. And then we have multiple classrooms in the center, and we're putting a small amount of our administrative staff up in the attic space. So for the first time, Centrum will have some of our staff in that arts and culture corridor as we collectively go out to raise the funds to restore these 125-year-old buildings. There's over $100 million of deferred maintenance at Fort Worden State Park. Probably not a surprise to any of you. All the state parks and military bases suffer from this same dilemma. It's a World War I infrastructure, and we're really committed to be here and to reinvest and rejuvenate the campus for the future. One of the things we're really proud of is building a really strong board of directors. We're very patient about that process. We have 19 people on our board. They come from Poulsbo, Bainbridge, Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, Port Townsend, Arlington, and Sequim. This is Lonnie Greninger. She's the vice chair of the Jamestown tribe. Joined our board during COVID, and we're just happy to have her. She skews the demographic in a positive way, which is also a nice thing. And she's in line to be the chair of the council sometime in the future. So we're proud to have her with us as we plan our future and remain relevant here on the peninsula. In closure, I mentioned earlier, this is our 50th anniversary. Just a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we were able to have Diana Krall come back. She was a student at Centrum in 1983 and was in fact discovered at Centrum in our jazz workshop that year. She came back and did a 50th anniversary benefit concert. That picture on the right is a picture of our concert Monday, July 10th. It was unbelievably exciting. Kenny G was a student at Centrum. Derek Kilmer was a student at Centrum. Many people have been through our doors over the 50 years. I mentioned also that this week we're in the middle of our jazz festival and jazz workshop, Jazz Port Townsend. So that's going on now. We have events all weekend. We have jazz in the clubs every night and 3 main stage concerts in that big balloon hangar this weekend. Next week, we're into our acoustic blues workshop, which is thrilling and exciting. We get people, some of whom have never been on a plane before. One of the keys to Centrum is we work with standard bearers of artistic traditions to bring them to be in community with learners of all ages. So we dig deep to find people in Appalachia and the American South and other parts of the world who can come here and share their craft. And it makes what we do different than just going to see concerts. It's really about that transmission of art and culture from one generation to the next. In mid-August, we have our Dance This workshop. Again, this is, I think, the 15th or 16th year. That's a partnership with Seattle Theater Group. We're very excited about that. And my final slide is our Flickr page. I'm just excited to tell you we have over 46,000 pictures of what we do on our Flickr page. All of them are downloadable. And I don't think there's a better testament to the diversity that we bring to this peninsula and the wealth of people that we serve than to see it in photographs. So this is a publicly available page. You can just go to Flickr and search for Centrum Foundation. We have almost 47,000 images there, which I find extremely exciting. And some of those photos go back to the 1970s. So with that, I'm more than happy to take questions, and I appreciate your attention and would love to hear more from all of you.
Thank you so much, Robert. We have some fantastic questions in the chat. So okay. If any of them can be made, any of your answers can be made brief, we can try to get through all of them because I'm dying to know some of these answers. Starting with the musician himself, Jeff Powell, he said, workshops have been trending upward for a while. How close are you to reaching capacity, and what are you going to do when you do reach capacity?
Yes, it's a great question. The limit at Centrum is housing. So that tends to be the ceiling for us, is the accommodations. It's true that you can take programs at Centrum and stay off campus, but by doing so, you miss quite a lot of the experience, because I'm telling you, the jam sessions and the interaction often goes to 2 and 3 in the morning. Most of our programs range at the high end in about 330 people in a workshop. We do some programs that are 16 or 17 people as well. So it's all ranges, but we don't discriminate. There's only one program that requires an audition, and that's the jazz workshop. And that's a reflection of the incredible strength of the Seattle high schools and the training that there is here in the Pacific Northwest, which is highly unusual. So I don't want to go on too long if you have a lot of other questions, but our capacity is really housing.
Okay, that's great to know. You mentioned some things. I'm going to skip to somebody else's question that touches on that. You don't discriminate. So Mike has a question about a specific steps you're taking to make sure that the facilities are accessible to people with disabilities and people that are in art.
Yes, the audio is challenging here, but I understand the question. One of the challenges of being in a World War I military base is that very few of the buildings are ADA compliant. We have probably a dozen or 15 of them that are. I'm in the process of renovating all of our accommodations that Centrum runs so that they will be ADA compliant. But we make accommodations. The new building we have is ADA compliant. And our theaters and other things are also compliant. So we have a questionnaire that all of our registrants fill out so that we know if there are any special needs, be they dietary or physical, and we always make accommodations for that. So I don't think we've ever turned anybody away, but it is a challenge. And often we'll move programs to make sure that audiences can be accommodated.
Thank you so much for sharing the answer with us transparently. That's great to know. Jan Levy has a question about music, drama, and visual art program budgets being cut in our public schools. I think nobody here is a stranger to that. Will Centrum programs take on a larger role in arts education in schools?
Yeah, very, very good question. I've tried to be disciplined as the leader of the nonprofit to be clear about what we do. So I ran symphonies for 30 years, and symphonies are always involved in the school systems. And I've had people on my board say, why can't we be in the local schools? Why can't we bring music into the schools and supplant the cuts that Jan is referring to? I always try to be disciplined, because you all know the term mission creep. It's important when you lead a nonprofit to know what you do. And what we do is week-long residential workshops. So we have on our campus a Northwind School of the Arts. And what's different about what they do and what we do is that they do weekly recurring classwork. But that is not what Centrum was founded to do. We do immersive week-long programming. So we support the local schools with writers in the schools, and a lot of our visiting artists from all over the globe visit regional schools and local schools. But it's not our ambition to take over the week-to-week training that's needed in our school systems. And if I may say, I think the discipline there is really important. It's not that we don't want to do it, but if we stray too broadly, I think we'll be diluted and get away from our core focus.
That's great. Thank you so much. I understand that there may be an issue with my connection. I'm hardwired into my works network, but I apologize, everybody. I'll get this one last question in for now. We have time for 2 more questions, but if I'm too difficult to understand, I'll have Mary Goldie jump in for me. We have a couple of questions about ferries. The first question is from Dorothy about ferry delays. Have they impacted anything at Centrum? And secondly, do you have transportation to the fort from downtown Port Townsend?
Great questions. The biggest ferries delays that impact us is the Port Townsend Coopville ferry. That's the main one that impacts us, and that is delayed if there's low tide or high winds. It doesn't impact us too often. you guys may remember the Hood Canal Bridge was supposed to be closed this weekend and all of next weekend originally by WashDOT. We put a lot of pressure at the OP on WashDOT, and we had that changed because it would have affected all of our agriculture workers and the entire rural community here in a really negative way on the 2 busiest weekends of the entire year. So we were happy that WashDOT decided to move those weekends and fix the needs on the bridge at other times, which they did do. A number of years ago when I got here, I bought a fleet of 5 12-passenger vans through a grant from the Seattle Foundation. So we have 5 12-passenger vans. My vision at the time was to run organized shuttle service from all the ferry terminals, meaning Edmonds, Bainbridge, Bremerton, et cetera. I got deep into that process after acquiring the vans and found out from the DOT that the regulations and the booklets were this thick, and it was absolutely nothing that we were going to be able to manage. It was onerous. So we have the vans. We do use the vans for transporting youth from impoverished communities all over Washington to come here. And we run the vans regularly for airport shuttles and things like that. We could easily provide transportation from downtown Port Townsend if anybody needed that. But in general, if you can get to Port Townsend, you can probably get to Fort Worden. So we haven't had too many requests for that.
That's great. Thank you so much. We have a really quick last question. Is Centrum involved with the Thing Festival?
Yes. So the Thing Festival started just before the pandemic. It's a Seattle theater group presentation. It's not Centrum. However, because we own so many, all the staging, all the lighting, all the sound equipment that's here, the beauty, because of our 15-year partnership with STG, is that they hire all of my crew and rent a lot of our equipment. And it becomes this incredible training opportunity for our crew, who normally work on much smaller scales, to be sort of the junior crew for Thing. And it's such a great deal because I think STG saves quite a lot of money by hiring local crew and hiring and using all of our equipment. And our kids, mostly, our crew is mostly students, get to work at an extremely high level. So Thing is a really serious community partnership, but driven entirely by STG. And we're happy to support it.
Thank you so much, Rob. This has been just a really informative session. My favorite takeaway was the ages that you cover are ages 4 to 98. That's kind of a age span that could keep anybody happy, I would say. And then it really excited too to hear that you're back to your 2019 levels in most of your activities, and you're just having quite an impact, and that's fun to see. And obviously plans to go on for another 100 years is exciting for all of us.
Well, thank you.
So in appreciation for your talk to us today, we've made a donation on your behalf to Harvest Against Hunger of 600 portions of nutrient-dense food. And that's been given in your name, and it's an organization that we love to support because they do such great work too. So we have 2 sponsors that have renewed for this year that are really helpful to our club's activities. One is Bloodworks Northwest, and the other is Joel Farrell, 2 long-term sponsors and people that have made possible some of what we're able to do. So we're really grateful for that. And once again, Rob, thank you for being here. What we always do at the end of our talks is have a little reflection, when I can, of how this moved me. So since I had 2 kids impacted by public school arts, I came up with my list. How do we benefit from the arts? Arts improve our creativity skills. Arts give us joy. Arts relieve stress. How much of us benefit from that? Arts gives us the opportunity to showcase our talent. Arts gives us confidence. Arts helps us do well academically. Arts helps us to communicate with other people. Arts helps us learn visually. Arts helps us express your emotions. And especially with the visual arts, it's a different language and it says things even words cannot say. So thank you so much for just really warming our hearts with all of what you've been able to do for years at Centrum and all of what we can do to be benefiting from the arts. So thank you very much. We have a little update on our next things from thank you, our next events. Take it away from there. Is that you, John?
I'm here today,
Oh,
Nancy.
thank you, Jen. Sorry.
I think I turned off my video, so hopefully my audio is better. And so our next meeting is going to be August 2nd at the Westin, where I attempted to go today, forgetting as Sergeant at Arms that we were virtual. So thanks, Mary, for making sure I didn't walk all the way there. This will be our annual Seafair program, featuring our long program, Jennifer Couture. So we are very excited about this one. I hope to see you all there. You know, this is a highly attended event every year. August 9th, we'll also be at the Westin and getting an update from the Evans School of Policy and Governance. And John Steckler has a mystery member spotlight. And we know John is the funnest, so can't wait to hear who that is. August 16th, we'll also be at the Westin and we'll have citywide council member Sarah Nelson. Looking forward to that. August 23rd, we'll be on Zoom again, final meeting of the month, and I will remember next time. This will be a panel discussion with Lisa Mannion, our city prosecuting attorney, and Ann Davison, Seattle city attorney, who we have heard before, and it was incredible. So you'll have to tune in for that. We've got August 17th, the Center for Wooden Boats. We have a happy hour. Tickets are $50 and they are found on Eventbrite. I'll get to that one, Mary, sorry. August 26th, we have a Family Resource Day volunteer event. You will need to RSVP with Faye Green, who is one of my favorite people in the world. And we always have so much fun at these Wellspring resource events. You get to meet the people that Wellspring is truly helping, and it is incredible, it's moving, and it's a great help to the staff there. And then very, very important, this is next week. On the Thursday, August 3rd, can't talk, I'm sorry, from 4:30 to 6:30 at Rock the Park summer program. We are asked to go help Mercy Housing and daytime activities to keep the youth there engaged during the summer. And they have previously received our SRSF grant to support this program. So you can RSVP with Joyce Robertson, and that will be a really fun way to get out in the community, rub elbows with your fellow Rotarians, and support a great cause.
Thank you for that, Jen. And we appreciate all of the club members that are taking the lead on these different service projects so that we have a great way to be connected when we show up at some of the service events. So once again, Rob, thank you for being here today. Thanks for the good set of slides too that helped those of us who have not been up to Centrum to have a sense of the magnitude of the campus that you have there. So I really appreciate that. And most of us will be making plans to go up there to see it for ourselves if we haven't already. So we thank you. And we look forward to seeing everyone next week. Our Navy activity is always fun, especially when we have, you know, a Rear Admiral as our keynote speaker. That is very exciting, and all sorts of surprises in store for next week. So we are adjourned for today. Oh, I did have, sorry. Wait. There's a reminder. I had one little flash to remind everybody about the district conference in Victoria. We will have a link on our newsletter on Friday that comes by email, but these are the dates, and we are going to have a good group of people going there for sure. We have Kathy Gibson, Kathy Williams, Jeff Borick will be there, I'll be there. A number of people have already said to me they plan to register, so please register. We'll have a great turnout, and we'll learn a lot and meet another lot of Rotarians from District 5030. So thanks for that reminder. Thank you. We are now adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Sorry for the mishaps today.